Cool. Hello, and thank you for joining us once again for a UX webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about how to structure your content to win those very valuable and precious everything we look for online bookings. I myself, my name is Kim Lantis, and I am part of the UX team here at Nearsoft. Joining me is my fellow Nearsoftian, Miguel Medina.
Hello, everyone.
UI UX designer. And then our valuable guest speaker is Federico Soria. Hello, Fede. We'll call Fede for
Hi.
short. Hi. Fede is a software engineer for none other than Airbnb. So we're really excited here at Nearsoft to be able to partner up today with such a renowned company, a company that takes their user experience to the next level, aware of what that's like on every step of the way. And we'll get onto that, I think, a little bit later today. But we're really excited, and we've got some great information for you today. So thank you for joining us. Before we move on, I just want to let you know that all three of us are team. So there, right there, you can see the beautiful faces of Nearsoft's UX team, designers, engineers of all sorts that basically have the goal of helping our company Nearsoft and other companies like you improve their UX experiences. And there you can see Fede as part of his larger team there at Airbnb. It's really fun. If you notice, they have a fur friend. I could see a lot of cultural overlaps with Airbnb and Nearsoft as well. We too are dog friendly and enjoy the bubbly also. So cool. So let's go ahead and get started. Today's agenda be doing is looking at the general challenges of the travel industry. Both Miguel and Fede will have some insight there. And then, of course, how content and information architecture can help have a better user experience. And one of those ways to manage and frame your information is by using the content architecture funnel, which is going to be the main thing we look at and use today. We'll go through the next steps and the takeaways. And I believe we won't be having the Q&A at this time just because this particular webinar is not live. But so let's get started. Miguel, Fede, what kind of challenges does the travel industry face today?
Well, we all know that the travel industry has grown very much and is still growing, and we can have now many different options to uh, visit sites or download travel apps, and within those products, the travel faces several challenges that can include the customer experience. Since users want to have a unique customer experience and have a tailored product based on what they need. And another thing is that the customer loyalty, it's somehow not tackled well, and we have another one that is the cross-device functionality, which is increasing the demand on the mobile approach. But the thing that in our opinion, is the most common source of frustration is the booking process. And here, the booking process, we all know, or we all have experience uh, booking a hotel room or a flight. We all know that it can be kind of an overwhelming process. From the moment you search for a destination, select the dates, choose the property that perhaps interested you, and then scan all the information within that property page. Well, it includes a lot of steps, and we can lose ourselves or have barriers within those touch points. And well, what do you think, Federico, about the booking process?
Sure. I think part of the problem started with us getting very used to how the internet works and how the e-commerce industry has grown. I don't know if you remember, but like Amazon being the pioneer on the buy now button, that you cannot buy anything. I was actually at a talk in which we're thinking about how things change. So before, when you wanted to buy something, you will Google it. Like, oh, I want to buy a computer. You will Google a computer. But now, when you want to buy something, you don't Google it. you search for it on Amazon, and then you start looking somewhere else, but you start with Amazon. So that kind of behavior, it
And the
has changed
user
with time.
reviews, like
Yeah,
that's why I go to Amazon first. Even if
yeah,
I'm not
but
going to purchase from Amazon, I'm like, what do people say about it? Is this a good product?
yeah, but the biggest thing is it's the stuff that we don't notice, which is we now search for products on Amazon instead of Google. And when that shift happened, we have no idea. But at some point, it started happening and it clicked in our heads. So that kind of behavior sort of permeated, became apparent in the booking process and how we book now hotels and properties where we want to go and stay. So we expect that level of like, okay, I want all the information. I want for you to sell it to me and make it easy for me to book it. And it's been kind of hard because booking a property, it's a lot harder because the inventory is just not there. It's not tangible. So you pretty much have to deal with like millions of people at the spot at that moment. And the other thing to notice is that when you buy something, these are tangible goods. Um, but lodging, it's a human problem. So you're going to stay at a place where a person needs to clean up, a person needs to attend to your needs, and maybe like welcome you. So this is human interaction. You're buying human interactions. So it's a very hard problem to solve. Although we've been getting better and better at this, and I think part of it we're going to talk about how we make it so that we somehow take out the human element, and it feels like it's just a purely transactional model.
Yeah, and as you said, Federico, we are getting better at that, and we all know that the booking process is a complicated one, and it has a lot of touch points which need to be corrected, and some of the problems that we are going to talk about on this webinar are related with the lack of prioritization of the information within a page when we are looking for a property. And what I mean with lack of prioritization is the some elements doesn't have um, the amount of importance that they need in order to pop up into the user's eyes or in order to guide them. And to put it on an example, imagine that we're searching for something, and the main element will be the search input, right? So if we put it way below the fold, user won't be able to make the search. So we are not prioritizing that element according to what the user needs. And another thing is the layout structure, which is how we are arranging elements based on what user may need and how and a way to guide them through our content. Let's imagine that we have a lot of information in a page and we are going to translate that into a smaller device just the way it is. Let's say on desktop. So we'll have all that information cluttered in that small screen, so it will make sense to our users. So we need to have a better structure, also a better prioritization of the elements in order to come up with the right solution for them. And the last one that we're going to be talking to is hard to find content, which is, as the name says, um, something that the users need to have. We need to anticipate the user needs and deliver the information, the right information, so they can make a decision and let's complete a process. And what do you think, Federico? Do you relate with some of this problem? Have you worked with this?
Yeah, definitely. It's almost on a daily basis that we bubble this up, and it's like, well, what do we think of the layout structure? What do you think? It's because this kind of problems change over time, as we were talking about. So right now the content might be, when you're starting a business, it might be like, you know what, the hardest thing we have to do is sell the product. So you start prioritizing images, pricing, and all this, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we now have inventory, we now have uh, a healthy amount of traffic. So now we need to make it sure that the property or listing that you're looking at is the best listing that you want to get. So now it's not so much of like trying to sell it to you, but try to match what you're looking for to what we have. So it becomes different over time, and it's something that, um, like I said, this is a process that you have to keep integrating and doing it again and again and again, and then you'll eventually get to a funnel and get better at it. That's the other thing. You never get it 100% the first time. You can
Yeah.
only try to get better as you keep doing it.
Yeah, yes, of course. And it's very important to keep iterating and keep validating what we've made so far. And
Yeah, I like that idea of making a comp a complex process, which we know to be complex, but your user needs to view it as something simple, and that's the tricky part. And before we move on, I just want to make sure, seeing as how our guest is Airbnb, we're going to be specifically talking about lodging, or hotel type bookings. But these types of problems, booking process, and even these types of solutions we'll be going over today can essentially be applied to any uh, booking process. Is that right? Whether it's travel, air, car rental, entertainment. Am I right in that assumption?
yeah, I mean, the way we prioritize and structure information can apply to any platform or any um, example. So further on this webinar, we're going to have a step-by-step guide on how to structure information that can be translated in and many approaches. You can use that exercise to structure um, whatever kind of information that you want. And well, uh, based on the problems that we have been talking, lack of prioritization, layout structure, hard to find content, a way to um, fix that or to correct that is implementing a better content architecture and a better information architecture, because it will help us understand how users organize information or how the mental models of our users works. So we can have a better idea on how to arrange the elements according to them and their needs. And well, first of all, what is information architecture? Information architecture is practice that helps users understand their surroundings and find what they're looking for in the real world as well as in the online. In other words, information architecture is a practice that helps us understand user mental models, how they arrange information, and in order to make something to be understandable. And content architecture, in the other hand, is a way to prioritize elements of the content in a way that it could be meaningful and intuitive for our users. So um, we need to combine these two practices or disciplines in order to um, have a better prioritization and a better structure in our design or in our products.
Fede, do you consider which are these information and content architecture equally important? Is one more important than the other, or is there anything else you can tell us to help distinguish between the two?
Um, that's a good question. Well, it all depends. Like I was saying, it depends what you're trying to sell, right? Um, to give you a clearer idea, is currently we have like two product. There's the Airbnb product, which is like listings, and we have another one which is called experiences. And they're both different products, and they're at different stages. Listings, we shipped this like about 8 years ago, and then experiences, we started this in November. So they're at a whole different place. They're connected, obviously, but the way we display it to users, one is we displayed um, what the information about the listing is. So you can do check out, check in, how many people can go in, et cetera. But it's more about the information. If you go through experiences and you go through iOS, because it's like mobile first, so you'll see the best experience on your phone. The first thing you see is a video, full
Okay.
screen. So totally different. But it's because they're at a different stage and what makes sense at that stage.
Mhm.
Obviously, as we go further in like a year or months or so on, that experience will change because it doesn't make sense to have a full screen video anymore.
Yeah, that's correct. And well, so how we structure information, we can have several methodologies such as card sorting that will help us um, understand how to arrange those elements. Perhaps the will tell us that it's no longer needed. The example that Federico said about the um, video on the desktop. So perhaps it will help us understand that the user won't longer need that into a smaller device. And we have other methodologies that will help us with the same problems, which are object-oriented UX mapping and the content architecture funnel, which is the one that we'll be talking in this webinar. And the content architecture funnel gives us the tools to define the message of what we are going to do. So it's like the intent or the purpose of that page, and help us define and prioritize the content based on the user goals and the business goals. So we need to put the user's goals and the business goal on the same level and understanding, so we can deliver users what they really need, but also not forgetting the goals of the product. And well, this method helps us to prioritize content elements, organize information with the right taxonomies, and shape the purpose of any page, but also understanding um, the problem of what we're going to do. And consist on 4 steps, which we're going to explain. But first, we're going to show an example of a property page that we have randomly taken from the internet for the purpose of this webinar, and for the purpose of showing you how to um, a way to structure information with the content architecture funnel. And we're going to have like a fictional scenario in which we are going to set the business goals and the user needs for the purpose of this webinar. But going back to the steps, first we have the analyze part. So here we need to understand why are we going to do something, right? What are the reasons that motivates perhaps our team to take action? Is there a problem that we want to solve? Let's say that we have discovered in analytics that our numbers are not doing so well. We haven't made so much bookings, and we have discovered that the um, the purchase rate is very low, so we want to increase it. So we now understand why we need to do something, right? And that will help us to define what are we going to do next, which is um, what the problem that we want to solve. So we have now uh, defined the why. We're going to redesign our property page, and so visitors can have better information and make better decision.
Fede, can you offer us any tips of how to bridge the why to the what? So let's say your purchase rate is very low. How do we get to the conclusion of redesign
Uh,
this page or
well,
like an
that is
analysis?
one of the hardest problems, to be honest. Like once you get to know to you have the why, and you have multiple whys, and you have multiple whats. Connecting the why to the what is the hardest problem, because you know how to solve a problem. Like, oh, you know what? People cannot click on this button. It's like, okay, let's fix the button. That's pretty easy. But finding that connection of like, okay, to give you an idea, the wording here, it's a little bit unclear, and that is resulting in CX tickets, which is customer support tickets, have
Mm.
spiked through the roof. And if you do a change in design or even iconography, um, you lower that, you have like a big win. That's the other thing. You usually start. The easiest one is like, we need to make more bookings. So you make the book now button more prominent, change some text, change the color, so on and so on. But there's the ones that creep out that you don't even think about, which is customer support, which is adopting a feature for ours. For my team, for example, is Instant Book. We want more people to use Instant Book. So what do we do across the platform to increase that? And that is really hard to think of, like pinpoint, like this is the part where we need to solve it. The way
Yeah.
we do that, we do we obviously brainstorm with the entire team, not only obviously not only designers but engineers, product managers, like every field we can get here, and then we talk to guests and hosts, and how they feel. So we do a lot of customer research. You definitely have to talk to your customers. If we do it and we're a big company, there's no reason why you shouldn't do it when you're small. There's a saying that I
Right.
really love, and it's like, do things that don't scale. That is one of them. You should always talk to your customers, so that you'll get a better sense of idea of what you need to do. But you got to be mindful that you're never going to know with 100% certainty what you want to tackle. And that is why you iterate through this process. It's like, well, we did a small increase this time. Let's try it again and see with the second time and the third one. And that's the other part of it is, you need to put a number into these things. You need to be able to measure and quantify it. There's a lot of tools out there. We use some internal tools, but basically it's saying like, okay, let's display this version to 50% of our users, and then this other version to another 50%. And then let's track the goal that we want to track, and then track other goals that might be affected. So sometimes you'll see something like, oh, we want to drop the number of customer support tickets. And you do a change and it looks fine, and you're actually lowering the customer support, but guess what? You're actually lowering bookings too. It's like, oh, maybe not so good here. So you need to be able to track all this when you make any changes. So it's all about making decisions informed on data, I think, because
Yeah.
it's a slippery slope when you go with like, I think this looks prettier. Let's go with this.
Yeah.
Right. And it's good
Totally
to get
agree.
that user feedback too. Like, what do they're the ones using it. What do they see that I don't see? Because I think sometimes it's easy to get that blindness of, it's my baby. I love this. It's so cool. But maybe it's not so cool because
Yeah.
it's very cool. All right. So what's step two after you've analyzed and you've determined what your problem, why and what your problem is, what you're going to do about it? Where do you go from there, Miguel?
Well, we need to now solve the things that we have defined previously. And here we need to ask ourselves several questions, which are, what is the desired outcome once the problem is solved? We need to imagine what will be that exactly that we desire. So, and what elements do we need in order to reach the desired outcome? This means that what are, let's say, or let's go back to the example that we are showing in this webinar, which are the property page. So here our desired outcome is to higher purchase rate, right? As Federico said, we need to have like a measure, uh, like a number. Let's say 20% more purchase on this page. So what elements do we need in order to achieve that? Let's say let's talk about content and information. So we may need several security issues, payment methods, booking requirements, minor information, property description, all the elements that will go in the site, right? And we need to talk to our users content that they will be needed in order to have a more informed page. So we need to ask ourselves that and talk to our users and, well, define together what are the elements. Next slide, please. So here we want to be sure to complete the purchase and to increase the um, the purchase rate, right? And the next one, please. Here we have gather all the elements that our users may need in this page in order to complete that action. So we need to establish that. And after this, we're going to prioritize all this information. And we will have three main categories. The first one is the fundamental elements. The fundamental elements are those elements that are the core of, of the page. Think of these elements as the elements that are absolutely needed in order for the purpose of the page to be completed. Let's say an example of this, the booking call to action. The booking call to action is needed. It's very fundamental because we don't have it, we won't make any purchases. So based on this example, we need to think of those elements that are fundamental. And the next one are the auxiliary elements, which are well, help as reinforcements of the fundamental elements. But if they are not there, it won't have a negative impact on the page because we will have already the fundamental elements. But if they are there, we'll have a more and solidified message or purpose. And lastly, we have the bonus elements, which are the nice to have. So based on this, we're going to um, prioritize together with our users. We'll have something like this. We will categorize all the elements that we have defined into these three main categories. And then we're going to talk with our business person, and we're going to do the same. We're going to establish um, two like personas with these three main categories. And then together, once we have defined all of these elements, we're going to unify or define the one that will met users goals and business goals, because the business person may have this different perspective of what the users may be needing, but the user is the one that will be using the product or the page. So we need to have like the same understanding and to deliver the elements that both parties needs. And
So basically, can I interrupt here? Like, you're
oh,
basically
yeah, of course.
garnering some type of like opinion from like the user side. Okay, in order for you to complete a booking, out of all of these things, what
Yeah,
must you have? What must you see? And then what would be
exactly.
like complementary to that? And like, what are just the things that like it's not to have it to complete your booking, but it'd be really cool to kind of look at. And so they prioritize that, and then you kind of switch the questions a little to from the business side, your coworkers, certain departments, customer service, for example, and where do you find the
Mhm.
most problems to occur? For example, could be customer service. We're always getting calls on these, and these things. Prioritize them. And some calls, but they're easier to deal with auxiliaries, and very rarely are they touching bases on these elements. And so then you're going to watch and see where these kind of overlap, and then
Yeah,
make your final priority groups or your fundamentals, your auxiliaries, and your bonus.
exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah. And well, we'll have like an overview on the page, right? Here we have identify with the element. We have the booking call to action. We have the price, the customer reviews, the overwhelming property specification. We have like three blocks of property specification, which are divided by a secondary element. And we have in the right image that we have three contact manner information blocks. So for well, to be a secondary element, it's repeated three times, and not even the fundamental elements are repeated that much of the time. So here we can find problem with the prioritization of the elements.
So when you look at this Fede, other than the contact manager information, which is important, it's auxiliary, but what else about this layout or something will you immediately notice when you look at your priorities that kind of makes your eye twitch?
So, um, first of all, ah, so one of the things that I like to do a lot is not make any assumptions. So, uh, go with things like, and this is me like outside of the box, maybe a little bit too outside of the box, but you start asking, and it's like, what does it mean for us not to show the price? What does it mean not having a call to action or no specification, or no reviews? Can you sell this booking with just showing the picture and using Apple Pay? Can this be mobile friendly? Can this just have a phone number that you call in and that's how you book it? Would that be better than actually having an entire website for it? So you start like going with like the deep end. It's like, well, that's crazy. We're not going to do that. And it's like, why not? Because you need the price in order to book it, and you need the call to action. It's like, okay, well, we're getting somewhere. It's like, why is that? Because it's 100 times better than calling a phone number. Okay, so now we're quantifying it.
Mhm.
And when you get to the point of quantifying it, it's like, okay, how good is this? For example, there's applications that you can book just for tonight. It's called Tell Tonight. So you don't need a date selector because the date is tonight. So as you say, that is not an important thing. So you can throw it out. Um, there's websites that they don't show you the price until you get to the last page. They sell you on pictures. So it's a matter of like what makes sense for your business. I think
Exactly.
if you can do a really good job of selling with pictures, you don't need to know where it is. You can just tell you it's somewhere in the jungle. Look at the pictures. It's like, oh my god, I want to go there. I don't care where it is. I can take a flight there. Um, I don't need to contact these people, the manager. Like I don't care. I don't care about security because I trust the brand. So you have to be aware of all these things of what it because here's the first thing. If I can make an opinion on any of this, it will be the best sort of decision or thing you can do with a feature is delete it. That is like the best thing ever. Delete stuff. It's also the most gratifying thing you can do. Um, just delete, remove, unclutter, make it super simple for anyone to use it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we learned from mobile friendly, doing mobile first things. It's like you don't need all this information. You don't need um, like for example, in Airbnb, you can do Apple Pay. So there goes payment method. Never have to put a credit card in. So try to think of like what can you remove and what can you. And then once you go to like the simplest page, then now you start testing with what you say, which is the secondary information, which is okay. If we add security elements, will this help upsell the booking? Would this help less contact to CX tickets? And then you start working with those things. It's like, how can you add elements that will not decrease booking, or it might decrease a little bit bookings, but it will also help on this other side that in net it becomes a better experience, or you earn more money, which is basically what you want, right? This is a business first, and then
Yeah.
service. But if you're making less money because you implemented reviews, that means that your inventory sucks. So you should probably remove the reviews or put it at the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's very important to have a
And work on improving
discussion.
your inventory.
Yes. Yeah, but
Yeah,
that's it's sort of like the chicken and the egg, right? Um, are you in charge of inventory? No, you're charging of making the best design work for your business. So therefore, like, don't hurt us. Like, remove that. It's like saying, what would be the best ideal scenario for a user is like, well, give me the prices for this, because some of the properties are listed in several sites. So if you're just for the user, oh, I can list the prices from different sites and they can book it from wherever they want. That is not good for the business usually, um, because you're linking to the other ones, but it's good for the user. So you have to take into consideration that your first thought, it has to be for the business. Obviously, then becomes the user, but um, there's this thing. There's a direct correlation. If you do well for the user, the company will do well. Um, so
yeah. That's
yeah,
why we need to have like understanding on our or a discussion with the business part and the user's goal. So it will come to on the same level of what both sides need, so we can deliver uh, a positive experience to both sides, and of course the return of inversion and the return of experience, which is very cool. And well, as the discussion um, continues, we can discover several patterns that will help us um, remove or delete the elements that are not necessary. And for example, on the two extremes that we have discovered that we have a lot of information about the property specification, and we have a lot of content and minor information that are not entirely so necessary, since they're not a fundamental element.
And
And we
yet
have
they're taking a prominent space.
exactly we, the fundamental element, it's being interrupted by an auxiliary element. And well, here we can see that something's not entirely right. So this exercise will help us to identify those patterns and help us to take action or make a better strategy in how to arrange and structure the information. So we have um, now the ability or the opportunity to make a visual solution or a solution to the problems that we have encountered, which are uh, well, elements that are not necessary and some important elements that are not displayed correctly. They are plain and they are hard to understand, which is our job to make them more understandable and useful for our users. So we'll have an example, a quick wireframe of a possible solution to the problems presented previously. So here we have the property specification, which is a fundamental element. It's structured and displayed on a more visual manner that will stand up the most important things that a user may need, which is the amount of bedrooms, the guests, how many bathrooms, how many beds, and the location of it. So then after that, he will have more detailed information of what they need. But first, they will have a first glance of the most important information that they may be needed. So in contrast of what the previous one and the visual solution looks like, it's we can see in the slide next, please. We have reduced the amount of unnecessary information. We have arranged it in a way that somehow will guide the user better through the information and will help them complete the purchase. But it is important not to Not to end the process here, we need to still validate and iterate this solution. So it's very important to talk again to users, talk again with the business people. So again, come up with with an understanding of what um, they need. So the next steps, which um, are to switch the device approach, is not entirely um, we don't need exactly to make it uh, desktop first. We can have this approach on mobile as well, and it's recommended to switch once we have one or the other, switch to the next. So we have a new arrangement of elements based on the device and based on what user need on those device on those screens, and well, apply the CAF, and of course validate the results. Do you have other steps that the audience may need, Federico, for this approach?
Uh, I think this is correct. And it really depends. Like you were saying, we started with web and then we moved to mobile. Um, I think more and more, obviously, there's the mobile first sort of uh, mentality, but more
Yeah,
and more it becomes more of a both. To be honest, sometimes we'll do well. There's the mobile first in terms if you have an app that becomes completely different in how you structure data. Even to the point that whenever we have conversations, is with mobile sketches. We don't even think of web. Like since we have so much real estate on web, we're like, oh, we'll handle it. It's not going to be a problem. But with mobile, it forces you to identify what are your, like you say, your primary things that you want to show your user. Um, yeah, I think that's one way to apply it. We definitely um, the last thing we do is actually build it. So we go through a lot of things just because we know that engineering, it's like a hard problem to solve and then build it, and it takes a lot of resources
yeah,
and
money
people
too.
to do this. So you kind of want to do everything up to that point. So because it becomes harder to like once you build it to go back and it's like, "Oh, you know what, we figure out that we want to do it differently." So yeah, makes
Yeah,
sense.
I like the idea of just that, what it is, a funnel. Like you start with whatever you think might be necessary or needed, and then you're able to prioritize it down using data, using input from proper sources, and then get that very basic of what you need, which is a really good approach. Like you say, we do this before we ever build it. I think, especially for startups or people who have an idea, because your resources and time and everything is limited, and I think it can really help in that way. But is there the temptation, or is there any point like where you can kind of go backwards, like, okay, we have this basics now, is it necessary to move up and broaden out, or would you guys always say keep it keep it simple, silly?
I think yeah, we try to keep it simple because it can escalate and it has escalated before, and it never ends well. Um, yeah, we so usually what we say is like we have this like perfect product, and we try to like trim it down. And once we trim it down, we're like, well, what is this? Is this an experiment, or is this something that we know for sure that we need to ship it? And 99% of it, it's like, what's an experiment? Because we really have no clue. We've done all these research, we've done all this, but we really have no clue how users are going to behave or what they're going to do, and if it's going to be a positive or negative. So we try to do like an MVP, which means minimal viable product, which is the smallest uh, possible feature that we can launch. So we can get we call it a signal, which is getting an idea if people will be into it or not. And then we have a steps plan. So let's call it V2, V3, V4. And then in V2, we start working as soon as we chip it. We already start working on V2, but once we get to V3, then we use the information that we gather and we learn, and we implement that, and then we keep just iterating until we get to a we already have, like, usually from the start, like, we want to get to a number, but we're never going to get to that number on the first iteration. um, so our idea is to get on the first iteration, let's say halfway there, because the first one, it's usually the biggest win. And then you get lower and lower, and then eventually you stop working on it and you work on something else, because there's this thing called the return of how much work you put into something.
Mm.
So let's say if you're Google, and you come out with Google search, and you spend 2 years on it and it's great, and then you spend another year on it and it's like, oh, it's even better, and then you keep doing that, and then you get diminishing returns. That's what it's called. So basically, is what it says is like that if you spend another year in the search algorithm, the improvement that you're gonna get, it's gonna be way smaller than the first year that you invested, and then it'll be smaller, smaller, to the point that it's actually there's no point investing into that performance anymore. You should tackle a different problem, then now you get a bigger scope, and then try to work on that. And maybe the more you work on different things, then that problem, then the original problem that you were working on, now it's different. So now you have to tackle it in a different way.
Mhm.
So it's something that we keep in mind all the time. Sort of, because one thing, and I mean, for any designer or developer, anyone who works, you never want to work on a feature for 2 or 3 years. I mean,
Really, really cool. One of the things that we were talking about before we started recording was the idea of not only switching your device approach, but something that I think is really valuable that Airbnb, being an international market, is also really getting to know your user and looking at the idea of like a cultural approach. And I know that's not the main point of what we're looking at today, but what kinds of things would you take into consideration to funnel down your audience and to create that type of awareness, Fede?
sure. Well, we have a lot of way how we dice things. One of the things that we were talking about is we look by markets, so different countries, different languages. Sort of like a small little thing. We go from the smallest thing to the biggest thing. One small thing that we were talking about is when you limit the character input on a text area. It's pretty simple, right? If you go by the Twitter standard, which is 140 characters, you're like, okay, this is as much as information we're going to allow someone to put in. But if you think of Chinese language, 140 characters is like half a novel. So you really have to limit that a lot, a lot more, and we do that. So we take different approaches. If it's German, you have to allow more than 140 because it's basically a hello goodbye. Um, so we do this kind of thing. Payment forms are different. Uh, you know, not the first thing you have to remember is like the entire world is not like the United States. So not everyone has credit cards. And even if they do, they might be used to doing different things. And every country is different. Some countries, in order for you to set up an account with Airbnb, you might need to add some extra information related to your country, which in the United States might be social security number, which in Mexico does not exist. Um, so there's like different things that you have to take care into account. There's offline payments. In Mexico, you can pay in an OXXO, um, which
For those of you who
obviously in the
aren't
United
familiar with
States,
Mexico, OXXO is a type of convenience store.
very much.
Yeah.
And
Um,
they're everywhere.
Yeah, or in Europe, it's more usual to do bank transfer rather than a credit card payment. So you really have to tailor to not just to your entire application, to what your market is. Um,
So that's
yeah,
scaling the different types of things to take into consideration when you're prioritizing. Like
Yeah.
really,
correct.
a lot of the elements are the same, but they're going to vary. And when you want to expand, and important items to just keep in mind also is the cultural viability of something that might work great some place isn't necessarily going to work great somewhere else.
Yeah, and usually sometimes you have to make trade-offs, right? I mean, it's really hard doing one feature that applies for every language in the world and across countries, and even inside of countries, it might be a little bit different, even when on wording on what a color might mean, just from background, cultural background. So sometimes you're like, okay, we'll take a first pass on this, and we'll take a hit probably in Brazil if we show this color. Um, but let's be aware of that hit. So if we're looking at metrics, we sort of account for that.
Very cool. So, anything else that we can take a look at today's takeaways? Basically, it all comes down to analyzing the problem that you have, defining your problem scope, whether that's based on what you're trying to accomplish or even culture of what you're reaching out to, and of course, prioritizing your content and then making your adjustments accordingly and always validating that, I think, coming back.
Yeah, of course.
Anything valuable to add to this before we wrap things up, Miguel, Fede?
Miguel?
I think
No?
we're good.
Very, very cool. I think it was very insightful, a really simple way for anybody to basically prioritize and make their product better at any stage of the game. So thank you all for joining us. If you'd like to know more, please go ahead and visit our website, ux.nearsoft.com. Go ahead and speak to Sandra. Her phone number is right there for you, or shoot us an email. And of course, if you're interested in having these slides for your own reference or tool for you, go ahead and shoot that email and we'll be able to share these slides with you as well. Federico, thank you so much for your time. I think it's awesome what you're doing with Airbnb, really exciting company to be working for and a company that we can all emulate and learn
Yeah.
from.
Thank you for
So
having
thank you
me.
again for your time. All right.
Thank you.
Fede, if anybody's interested, where can they get to know more about Airbnb and the practices that you all use?
Yeah, so that's good question. I know that we have like tons of resources. Um, thing called for engineering, for example, we have nerds at .airbnb.com. And then from there, you can find links. We also have, I believe it's UX or design.
Sorry,
We have we
I
have
just
another.
threw this at him. I
You
caught him
can go
off
to
guard,
sorry.
folks.
Yeah, you can
Nerds.
go
Nerds.
nerds.airbnb.com, and then from there you'll find any other relevant links. We do a lot of blog posts. We recently launched an open source platform to create animations on the phone based on SVG. So you can do like crazy animations really easily, exported from After Effects into your
Perfect.
phone. So it's like code, actually, not like a movie. So we do spend obviously a lot on UX, and we like to share all this information.
Thank you.
Cool.
Long live the nerds. All right, guys. Thank you again. And until next time, UX
Thank you for having me.
yourself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye
Take
bye.
care.